Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Joan Gabel, and I'm the president of the University of Minnesota. I hope you are all healthy, safe, and well. It has been said, talent is what you possess, genius is what possesses you. Today, you're about to meet and join a conversation with two University of Minnesota faculty members who have been driven by discovery, innovation, and impact, and who are tackling some of our state's and our society's greatest challenges, the planet's environment and the health of our children. Chemical engineer and professor Paul Dauenhauer, and cognitive neuroscientist, professor at the Institute of Child Development, and co-director of our new Masonic Institute for the Developing Brain, Damien Fair. Both are members of the most recent class of MacArthur Fellows, better known as the Genius Grant. Paul seeks to drive the complete decarbonization of the world's energy system, and Damien examines the brains of children and adolescents to improve on the therapies and long-term health outcomes of our kids. And I'm extremely proud to note and honored that we're the nation's only public university this year to have two faculty members recognized as MacArthur Fellows. They join a number of our alumni over the years who have been honored with the MacArthur Grant, including this year, our alum, artist Ralph Lemon. These honors signal the breadth, depth, and creativity of the research and teaching of all of our faculty members and alumni across the University of Minnesota system. It also demonstrates our university's ability to attract, cultivate, and support remarkable scholars, and how their work and the work of so many of our faculty, staff, researchers, and students provide extraordinary impact in our state, our nation, and the world. Recently, our Board of Regents approved a new system-wide strategic plan that we call Impact 2025. Two of the core commitments of that plan will come to life today in our conversation. One is our commitment to discovery, innovation, and impact. And that means to channel curiosity, invest in discovery to cultivate possibility, and create innovative solutions while elevating Minnesota and society as a whole. Paul Dauenhauer and Damien Fair are doing just that. Another commitment in our Impact 2025 plan is what we call Mintersections. We define this as work inspired by Minnesota to improve people and places, but at world-class levels. Damien and Paul's work is exactly that, and we thank them for that as well. And there are also so many other members of our faculty who are having great impacts and delivering on our Mintersections in the areas of health, sustainability, and food and agriculture. Of course, our epidemiologist, Dr. Mike Ulsterholm, has helped to guide the world's response to COVID-19. And faculty members across the university have contributed to better understanding, improved therapeutics, and new devices to help battle the pandemic. School of Public Health Associate Professor Rachel Hardiman created the vision for our new Center for Anti-Racism Research for Health Equity, which was recently awarded a $5 million donation from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota. And Dr. Amy Skubitz, director of our ovarian cancer early detection program, has recently discovered new ways to detect that deadly disease that kills nearly 14,000 women every year. These are just a handful of examples of how our faculty and researchers are making profound impacts on and serving people in our state, our nation, and the world. And Paul and Damien represent the very best of this impact and service.
I think we're in a race against time before we flood the oceans and the landscape with waste plastic, but also before we fill the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. So we need to move as quickly as possible to develop technologies that we can implement on a large scale. My name is Paul Dauenhauer, and I'm a chemical engineer. Renewable resources like grasses and trees are incredibly low cost, and there's no reason we can't manufacture all the materials we use today using the trees, grasses, and agricultural products around us. My work is to build a refinery that uses these natural products to make the chemicals and materials and energies that we use every day. With new materials that we make from biomass or renewable resources, our goal is to match the performance of fossil fuel-derived materials, but also build in things like recyclability or biodegradability so they can be long-term sustainable. So I think we could build an entirely new infrastructure of renewable materials that are both sustainable, but also drive local economies.
We often try to explain the brain in terms of very simple concepts. But the reality is, to really understand the brain, you need to be able to understand complex behavior from multiple angles. I'm Damien Fair, and I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. I study the developing brain. We use non-invasive techniques like MRI to understand how the brain develops from infancy to adolescence through young adulthood. One of the more important shifts in the field that we've been able to contribute to relates to the heterogeneity problem. That is the idea that if someone has a behavioral problem like ADHD or atypical brain trajectory like autism, that the mechanism is the same in everybody. And what we've been able to show is that that is very unlikely the case. Inside, the brains are very person-specific. We need to better characterize the mechanistic underpinnings so we can improve on our therapies and improve the long-term health outcomes of our kids.
Paul and Damien, thank you for being with us today.
Great to be here.
Yes,
So,
great, glad to be here.
yeah, it's a wonderful day, and we're really so honored to be able to talk with you and share some of your science, but also some of your experience with everyone who's able to join us today. And thanks again to everyone for being with us. So I want to start, though, because a lot of people hear about Genius Grants and the MacArthur Award, and they don't know how this happens. You know, how do you get this award? What actually happens? And I'll share for everyone who's with us, this award is different from most of them. It's very secretive. You're nominated anonymously. You're considered by an anonymous selection committee. And most of the big awards, the sort of big achievement awards, are much more open than that. It's a rare and wonderful surprise to be selected for this grant. So I know everyone would like to know your story, how you found out you got the award, and how you felt. So Damien, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, I learned about the award shortly after a very long and grueling virtual meeting that I had all day with some of my colleagues from the National Institutes of Health. So a random phone number from Chicago had been calling me repeatedly during the meeting, over and over and over, and I kept hanging up over and over and over. I thought it was spam. So, after the meeting, I finally answered and was ready to lay into the spammer about stopping to call me when I was given the good news. I was just a tad shocked and a bit embarrassed. It took me a second to realize, what was actually going on, and that first reaction was very much disbelief. But after that, there was a lot of joy and a lot of humility. I work with, some of the most brilliant minds on the planet, many of whom are very deserving of this award. So it's very humbling, to be honest. Now, they did tell us prior to the part of the official announcement that we were able to tell at least one other person. I asked, well, is it okay if I tell my wife? Can she be the person? And they chuckled and instead of course, but I was so nervous that I would screw something up and they'd take the award away that I felt that I had to ask.
Paul, how about you?
It was the week, maybe the week or two before the start of the semester. And for anybody that knows, that's how to, you have to prepare for school, that the week or two before the start of the semester is always just hectic, all sorts of things going on. And I had signed up to be on some sort of review committee or something. And it was on my calendar. So I clicked on it, I logged in, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to participate in some process here. And there was nobody there except a representative from the MacArthur Foundation who told me I had won the MacArthur Fellowship. And I know the MacArthur Fellowship because there's so many great musicians that I love that have won it. And so, the first thought that goes to your head is, well, I'm an engineer, right? You know that, those kind of thoughts, and you try to understand it. And then I think I had a very similar thought to Damien. Who can I tell my wife about this, right? And they said yes, same thing. And I talked to my wife. I told her about it, and then I was scared for the same reason. I got to make sure I keep this secret for a month and prepare. But it was a great honor. I think I couldn't do any real work for the next 24 hours because I was so shocked by it. All I did was watch a lot of the videos of all the other amazing people, musicians and artists and authors for the rest of the day. I think it took me that long to kind of process the idea. It was very exciting.
What a wonderful surprise. And I do think that if I could pick up on something that you both said, the MacArthur Fellowships are also called Genius Grants. And of course, today we have two scientists who did very different areas of science, and we'll learn more about what Damien and Paul do in just a few minutes. But what's really unique and special about the MacArthur Fellowships is that they actually award creativity broadly. And so there are people from a variety of categories, extraordinarily and talented and creative individuals who receive this grant. And so to be selected for it represents even more than being excellent in your field of study. It represents from this anonymous committee that you're extraordinary, period, regardless of your field of study, in fact. But let's learn a little bit more about your fields of study if we could. So Paul, let's start with you. Tell us about what you do.
So I work in the area of chemical engineering and material science. And so I'm interested mostly in how we take some material and we turn it into something else. And I grew up in a small town. There was a paper mill town. And so I've kind of watched this, an example of this kind of processing technology since I was a child. And when I went to college, I learned that there were whole degree programs in this. And then I started to see what some of the faculty were doing. When I was looking at graduate schools, I got to meet who would become my future advisor, Professor Lanny Schmidt. And he just really kind of changed my whole thinking about what the society could be, what chemical engineering could be, how we could approach sustainability. I was thinking about, how can we improve things like paper production, but my advisor was saying things, no, we should think about everything. We could make fuels from trees and grasses. We could make plastics. We could make detergents. We could make all the things we make right now from natural gas and petroleum. This could come from sustainable supplies, agricultural products here in Minnesota, like corn, like trees or grasses. It was just a very exciting idea that got me kind of into this thought process of, well, what could we possibly do? And the answer is we could do so much. And that's just led to a career where we just look after problem of, what sustainability issue can we tackle with chemical engineering and material science?
Thanks, Paul. So Damien, tell us your story.
So I grew up here in Minnesota. I grew up in Winona, Minnesota. Actually, I actually grew up in a suburb of this small town of Winona called Rolling Stone, Minnesota. And it's a rural community. And I will say that for me, there were some systems in place there that really sparked my trajectory towards what I'm doing now. At the time, there was some heavy investment by Bob Kierlin, who was a founder of Fastenal and a state senator from Winona, to kind of provide access to the school I was able to go to with regard to cutting edge computer access, started the new Minnesota Academy of Math and Science. And it allowed myself and others to get a peek at what the science was like, what you could do. And it was amazing. I was one of the first classes of this academy, and it just opened my eyes. Say, yeah, this is something that I can do. It seems small, but I'd say if I was not there, who knows what direction I would have gone for my career. For a lot of folks, particularly in communities of color, that accessibility, that ability to see the possibilities is not always there. And I got lucky. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I was lucky that my family was committed to my, investing in my education despite having relative, limited means, at the time. I remember my first home that they bought was a mobile home, and they drove me around in this terrible, little gremlin car. The windows didn't work, and it wasn't always smooth sailing. Of course, they're doing great now, but it wasn't always smooth. But I really appreciated that, And I also had a lot of peripheral support. I was surrounded by a bunch of overachievers who really challenged me to this day. I've always been interested in the brain, but it was when I was doing my clinical work in the physician associate program at Yale University that I landed on this. I was working on a small experiment using MRI with one of the residents at the time. This looking at the visual part of the brain. The experiment was just awful. It was a terrible experiment. But my awakening that you could kind of non-invasively peer inside of the brain of a person and kind of characterize how it's functioning without actually touching it just amazed me. And it was a hook, and I knew I needed to go get my neuroscience PhD, and that's where I'm at now. And then 17 years later, here I am having a fireside chat with President Gabel.
I know all your dreams are coming true right now. So you both have different connections and interesting ties, both to the state of Minnesota and to the University of Minnesota or how your journeys took you here. And I know everyone listening has their own story and connection to the university. And so for the two of you who've been so successful and recognized in your work and really pushed boundaries, how that has been a part of your connection to the university or brought you to the university or brought you to this state, I think is a very interesting story. And even though we're all here together now, we all arrived here in very different ways. So share with us why you selected the U for your PhD, and then what made you come back.
I did my PhD at Washington University, but I can certainly tell you why I came back. And I'm actually I feel in some ways as a new arrival here. I started here at the University of Minnesota in July of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, and you know the process of starting me to come back to Minnesota actually started about 2.5 years ago, with the invitation to speak and a wink by Megan Gunner at the Institute of Child Development and Dean Quam on a visit. They were looking to make big waves with a new hire. Now, my wife and I were very comfortable in Oregon. It's a great city. We had great jobs. We had no intention on leaving, and it was going to be a heavy lift to get us here. But the reality at the time, as I was being recruited by several other institutions, Cornell, Johns Hopkins, Washington University, OHSU itself, and I had a vision of what I would need to do, in essence, to kind of take my basic science and make it more palpable and have a bigger impact on families, clinical care, and things of that nature. Practice, and how I can get it into the community. And the gist is that I had to have, lots of different types of expertise that are usually siloed kind of come together to have a big vision. And now the first thing that you need to do to make this work is you have to have all the places, all the different types of expertise. And, the stool can't really stand without, all the legs. And the University of Minnesota, to be honest, is a crown jewel in excellence that is a little underappreciated, I think, in the academic communities. I think the culture here is a bit modest in nature. So I don't have a sense that the U is always recognized, doesn't get the recognition it always deserves. But some of the world experts across many of the disciplines are sitting right here at home. Now, the second thing that I thought you needed is I needed a lot of energy, motivation, excitement, drive to make a big program go that kind of brings all these folks together. And that needs to come from leaders, and that has from Dean Quam, now Dean Rodriguez, Dean Toller, and of course from the support of the community and donors. And that's here as well. Now I handed this plan over to Michael Georgiev, who's now my co-director at the Masonic Institute of the Developing Brain. And a little bit later, he came back and told me that we really love what you have here. We have very similar ideas, and we're just going to let you know that we're excited about it, and we're going to do this whether you come here or not, because we think it's so important. Then a subsequent visit, I was sitting very nervous in the office of Dean Toller, and he's going through a ton of meetings, and I was nervous because I wanted to talk about what I think it was going to take to really make this go. And I had a bunch of conversations with other leaders at these other institutions. It's always a lot of hand waving, but he came out so excited. He's like, Damien, I'm so excited for you to be here. Let's do this. And we just started talking, and within 10 minutes, I was hedging. It's like, I don't know if we can do it. I mean, it was so clear-eyed and unabashed, that it just hooked me. And I knew I had to be here. And that's why I came back. We came back. Now, put the icing on cake. Of course, I'm from here. I love it here, and I couldn't imagine a more comfortable place and environment for me to carry on and build some of this program.
That's wonderful. So the other side of that coin is sort of a different journey, but here we are together. Paul, can you talk to us about what made you select the U for your PhD, and then what brought you back?
Yeah, I think I have some of the similar thoughts as Damien. I picked my PhD actually to be in close proximity to my wife, but I had a choice of many great Midwestern schools. And it was really the visit when I came to Minnesota the first time in met with people in the department, and I actually met my future advisor that I just knew the fit was really good and strong and a good focus. And then, over the course of my PhD, I came to appreciate things about the university a lot more. I then left and worked for a chemical company for a while. I was a professor at another university, and just one day I got a call from someone in the department, and they said, would you be interested in coming back? And at the time I hadn't thought it was ever going to be possible, and that changed all my thinking. What really put me over the edge, though, is the chance to come back to this culture at Minnesota. I think Damien was saying the same thing, right? Every institution, organization, business has a different culture. And it can vary significantly, especially across universities, in terms of how well people work together, how efficient the system is, but also the investment from the state. Not all state universities are created equal. And that's, the more you interact with, the more you realize that. So the chance to come back here to the University of Minnesota was just a great opportunity to go to a place where the culture was phenomenal. And by that, I mean, we're a college of science and engineering within the whole university. And our chemical engineering program, our chemistry program, material science, physics, we work closely together. We have students that go in between. It creates this culture where we work together a lot. We have a lot of papers that we write together. It makes it feel like an honest team approach. And for the complicated things that we work on, that is a really great feeling to know that you can call someone, work with somebody, and just solve big problems together. On top of that, I think it was a similar thing to what Damien said. I'm from the Midwest, and to put all this together, it was just very easy. When I got the offer letter, I looked at it, I drove home, picked it out of the mail, signed it, and drove it to the post office. I think within 10 minutes, I knew I wanted to come back to Minnesota, and I've been here 7 years. It was the best decision I've made so far.
Well, we're glad you're here too, for a variety of reasons. And let's, Paul, let me stay with you for a minute, and let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty of the work that you were describing. So you are looking for ways to use renewable resources to make everyday things that we all use all the time, plastic bottles, car tires, shoes, sustainable and economically feasible. So sustainability in a way that is sustainable, if we can use those words that way. Give us an understanding and a sense, as I know we probably have experts on who are able to hear you, but a lot of lay people too, of what this really means. What does this entail? And what is it that you're hoping to accomplish ultimately?
Yeah, if you look at the way our lifestyle is, we use a lot of energy, we use a lot of materials, and that creates a really high quality of life. There's a clear, strong relationship between energy consumption and health and quality of life. And so we don't want to change that at all. But what we'd like to do is make it exist in a way that we can keep doing this for hundreds, thousands of years, indefinitely. So what we do is we look at issues of where chemicals, materials, processes interact with climate change, and also how they interact with things like waste. So plastic waste is one that comes to mind, right? What's going to happen to the plastics and materials that we use every day as car parts and automobiles, as our clothing, food packaging, medicine packaging? It's everywhere around us, and we can't go back to not using it. But we need to find ways to recycle it, biodegrade it, reprocess it so that we can use them indefinitely. And the key factor in a lot of this is the economics. So we're a research institution, but we're also engineers. So we want to create technology. And the technology we're going to make will hopefully be better. Hopefully it'll be recyclable. But along the way, we also look at the metrics for performance. So if we come up with a new plastic that we can recycle perfectly every time, it has to be cost effective, and we build that into the design. The last part of that is if we invent something like a new polymer or plastic, how can we take that into the market? So if we invent something, we want people to be able to use it. And so we work with the university to not only patent it, but either to license it to a large company or to form a startup company to get it out to where it can actually have real impact. Now that process applies not only to materials, like you were talking about clothing or shoes or something like that, but also to energy. Energy, the way we work with plastics is a lot of times we use them, we throw them away, they end up in a landfill, or hopefully not, but it happens in the environment. The same thing with energy. When we burn fuels for electricity or for automobile, that carbon dioxide ends up in the atmosphere. And so the same tools we use to process and make plastics and materials, we use to make fuels. And so we have similar technology that we're working on where we can take things like wind and solar power and turn them into carbon-free fuels and use that instead of carbon-based fuels that emit CO2 and affect climate change. So there's lots of little aspects and details to all of that, but big picture, it's taking the skills we've learned over decades in chemical engineering, material science, and chemistry and applying them to these sustainability problems for the things we use every day.
Well, that's fascinating, and we know so important both locally and for society as a whole. So Damien, your work is quite different and focused on a very individual level, perhaps the most individual thing one has, which is, as you said earlier, in the brain. Can you talk to us about your work and in particular our new institute?
Right. Yes, absolutely. So the new institute, the Masonic Institute of the Developing Brain, it really is an enormous effort to bring together basic research, clinical care, applied sciences, work with disabilities, along with policymakers, educators, and importantly, community leaders and organizers to accelerate discoveries for improving healthy brain development and to streamline the next generation of personalized care. We're really trying to break down barriers and increase information flow across these traditionally siloed disciplines, professionals and communities to maximize progress. So as part of all that, we have all of child, adolescent, and mental health is coming into a new building at the old Shriners Hospital from the Department of Psychiatry and Pediatrics, along with service providers from Fairview. The world-class leadership and research from the Institute of Child Development is coming to the building. Work in disabilities and policy and lifespan work from the Institute of Community Integration is coming together in the building. World-class science from the Center for Magnetic Resonance Research, where I do a lot of my MRI, and informatics from research computing and the Institute of Health Informatics are all being connected. It's really an all hands on deck, effort that's making us very unique. There are a lot of efforts being made to increase the number of what we call collisions with these collaborators within and outside the Institute in this regard that I think makes us quite unique. But I think perhaps one of the most important priorities as we begin to build the culture in the building is what we call a community first model, where we really, really want all of our communities to be a part of the mission, part of the science, part of the solutions. In fact, we feel like it's required if we're going to be able to maximize, the effectiveness of promoting brain health across the lifespan. Now, for my work, I do all types of very basic research trying to understand how our brains, what is so unique about every single person's individual brain? What are the profiles that relate to some complex behaviors? And it's a very specific basic science types of questions, but I'm very excited to be able to take some of that work and hand the baton off to the folks that are sitting next to me within the new institute, so that we can make some of the discoveries into effective policies and treatments.
Thanks, Damien. So I'll stay with you for a minute if we could, because the work that you're describing is fascinating and critically important. We all know someone who is touched by challenges in the areas that you study. We're all curious about our own brains and would like to understand ourselves better. It's fascinating whether you have scientific expertise or not. But what you do requires, as you describe it, not only your own deep commitment, but teams of people, resources in order to make your work happen. And both of you hold endowed faculty positions at the university that were established by private support. Many of the people watching today are those supporters. Could you talk to us about how private support impacts your work and your ability to do what you do?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, one of the most important aspects of private support or specific donations is that it allows us to pursue big ideas and do it fast. So in my field, the majority of our funding comes from the government, where there's nothing, fast about it. Everything is set up to be slow, from the inception of an idea until when you're actually able to carry it out. Even the work is often watered down, so to speak. And that's because the review process tends to want very conservative ideas that might be guaranteed to work, but that aren't really game changers per se. Right? So this funding really gives creative minds, an ability to think outside the box and tackle the most difficult and impactful problems with less resistance. Now, the other area that I've really enjoyed in this front is meeting some of our donors and kind of picking their brains about the science and the needs and getting some guidance about the various connections across the city and state. In fact, one of the first people my wife and I were able to meet here, thanks to the U and the foundation, were Lynn and Andrew Redleaf, who gave me my endowed professorship, who along with Minnesota Masonic Charities really kicked off the new MIDB. We had a chance to just hang and drink some Ethiopian coffee, have lunch. We talked about our families and backgrounds and things of that nature. But we even learned that the house that we bought was built by a childhood friend of Lynn Redleaf. She knows the house better than us. It's so Minnesota, right? No, but we were able to pick their brains and lean on them to get advice about various touch points and connections that are really helpful for our mission to build bridges and links through the city and state. And that's just been very helpful. So I'm very much looking forward to being able to do more of that when the pandemic subsides.
Thanks, Damien. So same question for you, Paul. Beyond the sizable grant that you receive as a result of the fellowship, can you talk to us about how this support impacts your work?
Yeah, I think private support has a really big role, and it's amazing to hear the similar issues between the work that Damien's doing and the work that we do. The process of funding scientific and engineering research it's a slog. It takes a long time to raise money. Sometimes it can be up to a year from the time you write a proposal to when you start the project. It's very rigid too. A lot of times they want us to plan out what we're going to do, sometimes 2 or 3 years into the future, and they follow up and make sure that we're doing what we can. But that's not always the way that science works. We will be out for a walk and some idea will hit you and you'll have to text it or email it to yourself so you don't forget it by the time you walk home, right? And then of course, when you get home, you want to call a student and say, hey, I got this idea. We can try this today, right? We have this new direction, this just some idea that came to you and you want to explore it. And this flexible support is what gives us the ability to do that. It creates what I think of as true academic freedom to not only explore your ideas, but to be able to support them in a way that lets you play them out in the laboratory or in the computer or whatever you want to do. And a big part of this too comes from the people that donate. When I meet, I think similar to what Damien said, when I meet with people that want to provide this kind of support, they're interested in solving the same problems we are. The public is very passionate about not only solving climate change sustainability issues, but creating new technologies and manufacturing opportunities that could affect rural Minnesota, urban Minnesota, both the agricultural sector in the south, but forestry in the north. And so people want to find these new opportunities that they can support. And this is just one way that can have a significant impact in ways that we can't do with the current funding model.
So let me follow up on that, Paul, because you talked about, having one of those creative moments unexpectedly, and that you wanted to get it straight to your students. So let's talk about your students, because in your case in particular, when you talk about climate change, the grand challenge of our time, at the end of the day, it's solved, and the work that gives us optimism about the future is done by people. And you've been recognized by our Council of Graduate Students as a faculty member who goes above and beyond in their work with students. Thank you for that. Can you talk to us about your approach for inspiring creativity and how you are looking to create the next Paul Dauenhauer?
Well, I don't think we're going to create the next Paul Dauenhauer. We'll create something better, probably, hopefully. The idea of creativity, when you say creativity, I think of music, I think of art, or one of the more, the areas I associate with creativity. And so to be an engineer and think about creativity, what does that mean? And, a lot of people out there kind of have this conception, I think, that engineering is lots of equations and you establish a problem, run it through the computer, and you have your problem. But really, you think about what new technology is. New technology is putting things together in ways that have never been done before. There's no equation that can predict that. So how do you get that into the students, that kind of mindset thinking? Because one of the challenges we have with undergrads is to get them to think critically and invent new things. I find that students are really motivated by excitement, right? If I present to them a problem that's important, climate change is one of these. The younger generation is extremely motivated to work on technologies that will address CO2 emissions and waste plastic and biodegradability and materials. So they're already quite excited. When they get even more excited, right, is when they see a way that they can have an impact, right? They run a reaction in the laboratory, they create a new reactor. It can do something that could work in real industry, and it could actually solve a big problem. That's when they get really excited. And that's when the ideas come. We sit around, we frequently sit around, we have coffee and work on the whiteboard. This is one of my favorite things. Coffee is kind of the driver for a lot of this, right? We sit, we walk, we get coffee, we come back to my office, we get coffee. And ideas they come from the conversation, right? And once you have the idea and the excited student, right, the key then is to get out of the way and just let the students work, and they're going to discover things. And, every student goes through this progression where when they start out, I have to tell them kind of what to do. And, about the third year, roughly, they start telling me that, they know more than me, they've read more than me, they've done more. They're the experts. And that's an exciting transition they go through. And at that point, again, I just have to kind of make sure they have what they need to succeed and kind of get out of their way. It's really exciting to watch that transformation when they go from young graduate students to senior graduate students and eventually get their doctorate. It's very satisfying.
I can imagine. So, Damien, sort of a different take on the same question. So when Paul talks about how you go from an equation to an engagement to an impact, I want to ask you about something that you're doing with educational outreach called YES, or Youth Engaged in Science. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The Youth Engaged in Science program is a program that we started at my prior institution, OHSU, and it aimed at really kind of reaching out and getting kids, particularly underrepresented kids, interested in science. And we're definitely planning on continuing that program here. We're building some infrastructure within our community engagement and education core to assist really in encouraging more participation in STEM from talented, underrepresented, often marginalized students. Part of our focus in this regard is really to tap into a goldmine of talent by reducing some of the inequities in education and participation in STEM. Or science, technology, engineering, and math. For my personal view, there's a matter of fairness, of course, which drives the importance of reducing some of these inequities in our society with regard to education, healthcare, economics. However, as a neuroscientist, these issues are lessening our chances of discovery and prosperity in our community. For places like Minnesota, where it is becoming more diverse and whose growth is driven by often underrepresented populations, kind of maximizing these opportunities for everybody is critical. So after winning the MacArthur Award, and like Paul was noting earlier, we had a lot of time to think, and they gave us an opportunity to give a quote, anything you want to say, tied to your award. And I wrapped my quote around this particular topic because I do think it's really critically important. So maybe I'll just read the idea and what I was thinking here. So every step toward a deeper characterization of brain function brings advances in healthcare, education, technologies, economics, and other enhancements to our society that deeply touch our everyday lives. However, continued progress will not come with the homogeneity of ideas, thoughts, education, experience, or culture. We need to embrace our variability, our diversity, and provide access to this pursuit to all the talents that exist in our society. It could be argued that the driving factor of discovery and advancement in nearly every civilization has been the result of human variability, where some outlier, oftentimes of minority status, pushed the society in a way that no one would have ever imagined. Ironically, in the sciences, our ability to proportionally value the importance of this principle has been limited. And I'm hopeful at this critical juncture in our history, we can harness our privilege and awareness to embrace a change of course.
Wow, that's excellent, and in such a way to capture such a broad thing. But I'm going to ask you both to sort of rebroaden. I want to, as we get towards the end, think about the outlierness of what you're describing, because not everyone thinks of themselves as creative. And Paul actually said earlier, you may think of of creativity as artistry, if I can paraphrase Paul, and it can be so many other things. Let's talk about creativity that goes above and beyond the scientific understanding or even the contextualization and intersectionality, for example, Damien, that you were describing. How do you, as scholars, scientists, researchers, but also people who do very applied things in teaching new students and developing sustainable businesses and doing outreach and providing clinical care, inspire creativity in other people? How do you inspire yourself so that when you're out on that walk, you feel the capacity to receive those ideas? So Damien, let me start with you with that. How do you inspire creativity in others? How do you keep yourself open to your own creativity?
Well, I'm, to a fault, I'm a yes man. I do a lot of, I say yes to a lot of things, I'm sure there's some of my colleagues are laughing on the other line here because I get involved with a lot of things. But I've been talking a lot, and my feeling is that creativity is a function of experience. The more diverse and wide-ranging your experiences are, it provides the additional clay from which you can mold something new. So I always really encourage my students and trainees to step out of your own, what I call cognitive box and try something new, even if, particularly if it makes you uncomfortable. So now, of course, one has to be smart about how that's done, but building on your experiences, maximizing oftentimes what I call your tool belt will provide the maximum flexibility to take your ideas into places that you could never even imagine.
Paul, same question for you. How do you inspire creativity and leave yourself open to your own creativity?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily an easy answer to think, because it's such a nebulous concept of what is creativity and how do you inspire it. I think about what I want my students to be doing. I might give them a problem, but then I want to give them some freedom to explore it in ways that I'm not going to think of. Right? It's a huge multiplier to be able to work every day with a lot of students. And a part of that, I think, is enabled by two things, like the inspiration part, where they see what other people have done. So we bring in, and I think every department in the university does this, bring in people from the outside doing amazing things. And every day they're putting new ideas and new connections into people's brains, right? And then they make these connections with their research, and it happens. They can put these together and do things that just I haven't thought of. But the other part is flexibility. There's a sense in, I think, academic research that things are very rigid, right? I run these tests, I analyze data this way. But I want my lab to be more of a playground, right? The idea of playing with ideas and trying out new concepts. And as long as they're doing it safely, give them the freedom to try things that just come to them, or give them the opportunity in the lab to try things out. And so my students will tell you that I'm not super rigid in terms of when we meet or anything like that. And I kind of want it to be that way. I want them to have the freedom to work on all sorts of different problems that come into their mind. I also want them to work in pairs, right? Students, when they work together with other students, they bounce ideas off each other, they make more connections. It's more than just individuals working in labs. So that ability to kind of inspire them with new ideas, but also give them flexibility is what I hope leads to this kind of creativity. And then, they bring ideas to me, and sometimes I get to, partially claim credit for them also. So it's not just, the lab is the professor, of course, is the figure for it, but it's a team of people, sometimes 10, 15 students that are all working together and, working out ideas and trying them out on each other.
That's really interesting. And I think it's the thing that many of us who may or may not have scientific expertise still want to know, that we can be creative, that we can make a contribution, and that we can inspire others. We're very grateful for your creativity and your time and your amazing work and the impact of that work. We're so honored to congratulate you for this high recognition. And we thank you for sharing your time and insights with me and with everyone who's with us today. You carry on a remarkable tradition of University of Minnesota MacArthur Fellows, which also include Professor Emerita Patricia Hampel and Distinguished McKnight Professor Marla Spivak. And we have a short video about what their MacArthur grants meant to them.
I want to offer my sincere and delighted congratulations to Professor Dauenhauer and Professor Fair, and a shout out to Professor Spivak as well. I'm thrilled that your work is being confirmed as it is by this fabulous opportunity. When I received the MacArthur news in 1990, a woman from University Relations called me and said, "We'll take care of media for you." And they told us someone on our campus was going to be awarded the MacArthur. We were ready to go to the medical school. So nobody expected an associate professor in the English department, of all places, to be getting a MacArthur, and least of all, the associate professor herself. And I was baffled and kind of astonished, and of course happy. I mean, it's not a problem, but it all seemed very strange, and I thought they should be on the other side of Washington Avenue. I taught at the university for 36 years, but my association with the university goes way back. As an undergraduate, I got my BA at the university. Yes, I was an English major. I have a deep, deep connection to the university, a great love for it. I don't think I ever step on that campus without feeling a kind of like I'm somewhere special, just knowing that everybody is doing something very exciting there. The work is on both sides of Washington Avenue, as I think of it, very exciting.
I received the MacArthur Fellowship in 2010, and it was a vote of confidence out of the blue for me. I really was not anticipating that. And the award allowed me to launch some research and outreach projects that I'd been thinking about for a long time, but were too risky or too kind of out there to write grants to cover. One program that I initiated using MacArthur funding was this program called the Bee Squad. Among many things that the Bee Squad does, and they do many things, they maintain colonies of honeybees on corporate and business headquarters, on museum rooftops, in hotels, rooftops, and other public and private spaces. And these colonies, these honeybee colonies, serve to educate people about the importance of all of our bees and their need for healthy and thriving habitat. I'm inspired to bring people in through the bee portal, is sometimes what I call it, to show them how the simple act of planting flowers has so many multiple benefits for our planet Earth. I was grinning ear to ear when I learned that Paul and Damien received the MacArthur Fellowship in 2020, knowing the academic freedom that it would foster for them and the creativity that it would unleash. I'm very excited to hear about the projects that they create and that they take up.
Friends, in closing, thank you so much to Professors Hampel and Spivak for sharing their experiences, for representing this incredibly honored tradition, and of course to Professors Dauenhauer and Fair for exemplifying the unique and robust creativity of our faculty. For all of us, when we get back to campus, and I know we can all see the light at the end of the tunnel, it will be soon, I encourage everyone to take a nice stroll down Scholars Walk. On Scholars Walk, which sits in such a beautiful part of campus, you'll see the names of various award winners and prize winners, from Nobel Prizes, Pulitzers to Guggenheims. And of course, we have a plaque on Scholars Walk for our MacArthur grantees. And Paul and Damien, your names are already there. So I encourage everyone to take a look. We stand in appreciation that you're such an important part of the story of this institution, and how your work really demonstrates the value created for Minnesotans by and for our University of Minnesota communities has never been higher. So I thank you all for all you do for the University of Minnesota, for the state of Minnesota, for all of us joining today, and to everyone out there for joining us today. We're very grateful and honored to be able to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.